boring subject. It takes a long time and it takes a lot of effort. And I learned from my survey that not many of you are interested in it. But just because we find something boring does not mean we should not inform and educate ourselves about it. So today, I will not only be talking about composting, but the general effects of composting and also different methods to compost. So let's get into it. What is composting? Composting, in general, is the breakdown of organic materials by bacteria. According to Aaron Warnick from the American Public Health Association, once your scraps have been turned into compost, it can be mixed into soil and made more nutrient-rich. And according to the article, Where Does Garbage Go? By Scholastic Inc., composting recovers nutrients from organic matter. If you put the wrong items in, you can release toxins into your food or fertilizer. So let's talk about what not to put in. So things such as bones and raw meats you should never put in or directly onto your compost or garden, considering that composting is just the breakdown of organic materials. You don't even need a bin. You can just put it on top of, directly on your garden. They have harmful toxins in raw meat, and bones don't break down in a sustainable way for anything to grab onto nutrients. Next we have oils and fats. Oils and fats break down in a very harmful way for plants and soils. So if you put that on your garden or in your compost, it's more likely to do harm than good. And then next we have large rinds and peels, which you would think should go right into your compost, which is correct, but you should never put them onto your garden as they release a lot of nitrogen, which according to Marissa Ames, an agricultural expert, who also wrote the list of items. Fresh plant matter helps grow in vegetables because active decomposition releases nitrogen, and nitrogen makes plants grow. So large rinds can actually release too much nitrogen and can kill your plants. So you should never put them on your garden, but you should put them in your compost. Next we have ashes. Ashes don't have any nutrient value, so you should never put it in your compost or on your garden. The next one's fairly obvious, but it's a good reminder to clean out your seeds from your scraps. It's living seeds. You don't want any random items sprouting in your garden or in your compost. And then the next, again, you would think you would put it in, is leftovers. Always put leftovers in your actual compost bin rather than your garden, because if you put it in your garden, there's a good chance that animals will come and eat them and then ruin your garden. So now that you know what it is and what not to put in, let's talk about how you do it. According to Aaron Warnick, he quotes from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency that a successful compost needs 3 basic ingredients: greens, browns, and water. So to paraphrase what he says, greens are your scraps. They're your leftover meals, they're your apple cores and banana peels. They're things that you usually throw away and think nothing of, but they can go in your compost and they actually fuel it. Without it, you would have nothing. Next are our browns. These are things you find in your yard, like leaves and twigs and grass trimmings. Without these, you would not have any bulk to your pile. They're equally as important as the greens, so you should always try to keep an equal amount of each. Next is water, which is arguably the most important. If you have too much water, you have a swamp and nothing decomposes, and you have nothing left. And as I stated earlier, composting is just the breakdown of organic matter by bacteria. So if you don't have any water or not enough water, all that bacteria dies off and nothing decomposes. So where do you put all these scraps? Compost bins or your garden? According to Natural Planet, a website I cited for this, there are many different types of compost bins, easy for everyone and for different situations. I will be going over the top 3 and just giving you a general overview of them. So to talk about the first one is the chicken wire. It's your most easily flexible kind of compost. It can be any shape, any size you choose. All you need is chicken wire and fencing. Typically, people like to make their own compost. The only downside is it doesn't look the nicest, and the smell containment is little to none. So it'll probably smell really bad in your yard. The next is probably what most people think of when they think of composting, which is your basic log cabin. It's very similar to the chicken wire, except it's made of completely wood, and you only need one bin, but you can have more than one. The downside to this is the size. It's usually a lot larger to help stir around your compost, and it takes up a lot of space. The next one is a tumbler. I actually put a picture of someone had made themselves, because typically you buy them. Now these are the most manual labor, you don't have to do anything with these. All you have to do is put your scraps in and turn it. Pretty simple. The only downside is if you do buy it online, the prices range from pretty small to pretty large, and you don't really know the quality of your compost until you get it. So now that we know all this, how do you compost? It's a pretty simple process. You put your scraps in, you spin it to aerate it, and you have your equal amount of greens, browns, and a little bit of water. If you're too worried about how much water you're putting in, you can always put scraps like watermelon and cucumber in, because those have the water it needs. So why do we stir it? We stir it to aerate it, because if we did not aerate it, it would become an anaerobic expression, which means there's no oxygen available, and that releases methane, hydrogen sulfide, and carbon dioxide into our atmosphere as well. But an aerobic expression releases carbon dioxide, energy, and water. You can see which one you'd rather have in your atmosphere. To paraphrase Scholastic Inc., landfills are a cheap method of waste disposal. They contain a lack of oxygen, which in food decomposition can make it take a long time or impossible. In New York City, a man named Joe Bavar, probably murdered his name, wrote an article about where his trash goes. And New York City produces a lot of trash. So this is our best place to look because it has the most research done. According to him, and I quote, 14 million tons of trash a year is put into the compost. And that's about 3,300 pounds of trash per person. That's a lot of methane gas into the atmosphere. I have pictures to show. They actually closed down the New York City landfill, and now they take it about 300 miles away because they've ran out of room. According to James L. Simpson of the New York State Conservationist, I'm going to paraphrase, composting enriches your soil, it lowers your carbon footprint, and it also builds a circular economy for food waste. I have now informed you about what composting is, about how it can affect the environment, and how to compost. Thank you for listening to my speech.